Welcome to Stories of the City. I'm your host, Victor Jacobo, and today we'll take a look at two well-known historical landmarks in the downtown area of Milwaukee. Milwaukee became a city in 1846 and quickly began growing and developing into the city of what it is today. Each building has its own unique history and is an interesting story to tell. The two landmarks we're going to see were both built in the late 1800s, and both quickly became well-known landmarks of the city. If you live in Milwaukee, you've probably seen or even been to these buildings, but you may not really know what they're all about. Today, we're going to take a look at the Pfister Hotel and the City of Milwaukee City Hall building. The first building we're going to see is the Pfister Hotel. Built in the late 1800s, the Pfister has always been a well-known landmark of the downtown Milwaukee area. Located on East Wisconsin Avenue, the Pfister Hotel was the first of its kind to include many modern-day luxuries, such as an all-electric lighting and thermostats. The Pfister was a showcase of Milwaukee's industrial advances at that time in history. Today, the Pfister stands as an incredible piece of Milwaukee's history.
It was built in the last decade of the 19th century. Although its origins you could actually take back to the 1880s in the sense that the impetus for building the hotel was the Newhall House fire. The Newhall House fire remains to this day the worst fire disaster in terms of loss of life in the history of Milwaukee. But it also represented a loss of a major institution, and that was the Grand Hotel of Milwaukee. The Grand Hotels served an important civic function as well as a commercial function back in the 19th century. That is that you had a Grand Hotel, and not only was it a place for people visiting your city to come and stay and dine and those sorts of things, but it was also a point of pride that demonstrated to the rest of the world that you had arrived as a metropolis, that you were no longer just a little crossroads village. The Newhall House, when it was built in Milwaukee in the 1850s, was celebrated back east as the most lavish hostelry in what was then considered the West. And so for Milwaukee to lose that signal property was a major blow, particularly as Milwaukee was making the transition from being essentially a maritime and agricultural center to becoming what it would be for most of the 20th century, which was, well, they called it the machine shop of the earth, or it was where the new technology, it was the Silicon Valley, essentially, of the coming industrial era. Milwaukee was producing the technology that was moving the rest of the world into the heavy industrial age. And to suddenly be without their Grand Hotel was a major consideration. So a number of prominent citizens got together, including Guido Pfister, to form a company to build a new Grand Hotel. Now, this was in the early 1880s. By the latter part of the decade, the project had kind of gone on the back burner, and it wasn't until 1889, when Guido Pfister died, that his son and daughter, Charles Pfister and Louise Pfister Vogel, stepped forward to resuscitate the project and to complete this final act of philanthropy that Guido Pfister had been involved in. They again reorganized the Milwaukee Grand Hotel Company and sold stock to a value of $500,000, which was in those days a lot of money for a 200-room hotel. They began the project in 1890, but because of the various things and changes that they made through that period, the hotel did not officially open until May 1st of 1893. When it opened its doors on May 1st, it was the most expensive hotel per room unit ever built anywhere in the world. It was always intended to be Milwaukee's great house, Milwaukee's Grand Hotel. And we have been that for the last 1893 to 2012. We're 119 going on 120. And we don't feel that we look a day over a day over 10. We are a destination in and of ourselves, as well as a stopover. Back in the 1980s, 1990s, when there was a lot of development activity going on the other side of the river, we were asked about, you know, how we felt sort of being off by our lonesome with the Bradley Center and the Convention Center and all the things on the other side of the river. And the point that we made at that time is people come to attend an event at the Bradley Center or at the Frontier Airlines Center, and they stay at the Hilton or the Intercontinental or one of the hotels in the area there, so that it's convenient for them to go to the reason for their being here. The difference is that people come to the Pfister and then they go and do things at the Bradley Center or the Center for the Performing Arts or the Convention Center. We like to think that we are a destination as well. We have a number of guests who will come here and will not leave the building for a period of days. They are just here to be at the Pfister. And that was really as it was intended. I mean, the Pfister was conceived, as most of the Grand Hotels were in the sort of golden age of the Grand Hotel, to be cities within the city, where you could have a whole experience without necessarily leaving the four walls of the building. And we like to think that we carry that tradition now into our third century. Yes, the building has been expanded. The original Pfister Hotel occupies the corner of Jefferson and Wisconsin Avenue and extends north about half a block. Now, when the hotel was built, the lot immediately north of there was occupied by the Pfister family home. In 1962, when the Marcus Corporation purchased the Pfister Hotel, they recognized that one of the things that they needed to do to make the Pfister not just viable, but to return it to its preeminence as Milwaukee's place to stay, was to expand the available rooms. When the hotel was built, for instance, you didn't need meeting facilities. You didn't need sort of a plant for scheduling, you know, a variety of small meetings and events. In most cases, those kinds of things were handled at exposition centers, various things like that. And the function of the Grand Hotel was really primarily to house people who would come to an event that would be taking place off-site. With the arrival of air travel and travel by car, things that would have been unthinkable to meeting planners in the 19th century, the idea of bringing people together from a 6-state region for a half-a-day meeting, were now eminently possible. And so the Pfister had to adapt the existing building to make that possible. Well, what was discovered was that we simply did not have enough available space to make us competitive with what was at that time the major downtown hotel. It was the Schrader at that time, which is now the Milwaukee Hilton City Center. So the Marcus Corporation took it upon themselves to add our tower section, which includes our parking structure. It also has a tower that goes up 22 stories that houses guest rooms. Our pool and the Hotel Nightclub Blue are on the 23rd floor, but it also doubles the available meeting space that existed at the time of the purchase of the hotel. If you sort of go down the list, decade by decade, and shout off names. Chances are, if they passed through Milwaukee, this was their Milwaukee Address. So, you know, everything from present-day celebrities, and of course we don't discuss, you know, current guests, but, you know, going back to presidents, every president since Harry Truman and a number of presidents before that, Woodrow Wilson, actually William Howard Taft, although he was former president at that time, but he was informed of the end of World War I while he was staying here at this hotel. William McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt, Buffalo Bill, Enrico Caruso, Prince Henry Hohenzollern. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Sarah Bareilles, Ethel Barrymore. It really makes you think about the place and the spirit of the place when you realize that you're walking on the same staircases, looking at the same things that, I don't know, that Sarah Bareilles looked at. You know, when you're looking at the same paintings that Teddy Roosevelt looked at, you know, when you're having the same experience as people that you've only read about, you know, and that you realize that just like you, the Pfister was their Milwaukee residence as well. The Pfister was built at a time when Milwaukeeans took enormous pride in their city. Milwaukee was the Deutsche Aachen. It was the German Athens. It was nationally recognized for the quality of the cultural life here. It also represented really the triumph of American industry. As I say, this was the Silicon Valley of the heavy industrial age. And the Pfister manifested that with a variety of you know, technological innovations. It was one of the earliest purpose-built all-electric hotels in the country. And they had the for lack of a better term, the fortitude to not hedge their bets with gas lights. That is, there was never any gas illumination in this hotel. It was always all electric. So they were really betting on this to be the hotel of the future. The Pfister had the first use of multiple thermostats. This was the lab that technology was created on. Again, it could be done because Milwaukee was where the inventor of the thermostat had his company. So it was part of the fabric of the city at that time. So it was really a showplace of what was going on at that time, at a time when Milwaukeeans really embraced their city and embraced what it represented to the rest of the country. I think now it means it is more important because it is a reminder of what a wonderful city we live in at a time when people tend to look elsewhere. You know, the grass is always greener someplace else. You know, we can't do this because we have to go to Chicago for that, or we have to go to San Francisco for that, or we have to go to New York for that, or we have to go someplace else. The Pfister stands as a tangible reminder that we don't have to go anywhere. Indeed, that the rest of the world comes here for what we have to offer. And so I think that in that sense, the Pfister is beyond being a wonderful piece of the city's history, beyond being just a remarkable building in and of itself. It stands as a reminder of the fact that we are a wonderful community, and a community that definitely, you know, punches above our weight in terms of what we have to offer.
It's certainly interesting to learn the history of such a prominent building in Milwaukee. The city of Milwaukee takes great pride in its many historical sites throughout the area, and is proud to have played such a large role in the development of industrialization while being visited by so many important leaders of our country. The next historical building we're going to take a look at was also built in the late 1800s. The City Hall building was completed in 1895, but has expanded since then to meet the needs of the growing city of Milwaukee. At the time it was built, it was the third tallest building in the country and was equipped with the third largest bell in America. The City Hall building is located at Wells and Water Street and has many interesting stories to tell. We'll hear about the death of a troubled man and about the bell ringer and his family. The Milwaukee City Hall takes pride in preserving the historical status of its building. Let's take a look.
Okay, my job title is Maintenance Technician 2, and I started working for the City of Milwaukee in February of 1997. And what I do is basically take care of all the heating and cooling issues with the building itself, along with the municipal building across the street, as well as the 809 North Broadway building. And we also take care of any plumbing issues, noise, odor issues, anything to, throughout the course of the working day for the upkeep and maintenance of the building. City Hall was built in 1895, completed in 1895, but if you look at the southeast corner of the building itself on the outside on Wall Street, you'll see the cornerstone that is marked 1893. And the current City Hall building was built on the same plot of land as the original City Hall building. And as the City of Milwaukee got bigger and more government officials were needed, a larger building was needed to accommodate that. The height of the building itself, from the sidewalk to the top of the steeple and the bell tower, is approximately 350 feet, which is about 22 stories up. So, and I think that it was, at the time, even the third tallest building in the country when it was built. And even when the bell rang, somebody had written down that they could actually hear it as far as Oconomowoc. So, because if you think now, you got so many larger buildings that could, drown out the sound. But figure how flat everything was for the most part back then. Just our common council meetings where all the city budgets were passed, licenses had to be approved here. Anything related to city matters, getting dog licenses, as a matter of fact, is another thing. There's also historic preservation, anything to do with city lawsuits as well. City attorneys were housed in this building as well. The one that I am aware of was there was some renovation done in 1995 to accommodate the centennial of the building, and then since 2005, as most people know, the complete outside of the building had been redone, which took about 3 years to complete because of falling brick and mortar, and they wanted to restore it back to its original look. Well, this is known as the seat of city government, so anything tax-related, property tax-related, licenses, complaints about any city services, they could all be directed into one spot. I do believe so. Most of the offices may have different titles than they used to, but the mayor, the common council, all conduct their businesses or business here pretty much the way that they did, 100-some years ago. The family that lived up on the 9th floor of the City Hall building, it was actually the bell ringer and his family that had lived up there till I believe about 1920. The bell ringer would actually manually ring the bell every hour as needed. I'm not sure what the sequence of the ringing was at the time, but up until about 1920 when I guess Mayor Hone decided to eliminate that due to the fact that the ringing of the bell was giving him headaches. So the story goes. And the legend also has it that one of the bell ringer's children was born up in the City Hall building in his keeper's quarters. So, and I believe they stayed up there until about between 1920 and 1930. From what I know, the bell that we currently have was melted down from 3 other bells, including the one from the original City Hall built on the same site. It weighs 11 tons And when this bell was cast, I believe it was the third largest in the country after the Liberty Bell, and then I think from a cathedral somewhere else in the country, name escapes me. And if you get a chance to look at the bell up close, you'll be able to see inscribed on it all the names of the city officials at the time that the bell was cast in the late 1890s. Well, the clock mechanism, I believe, was installed by Johnson Controls when the building was originally built. There's a main clock mechanism on the 9th floor and then a long shaft that goes up about 100 feet, whereupon it branches off to the 4 faces. And when the renovation was done, one of the things that they wanted to do was restore the clock to its original look, where it had the white face with the black numbers as opposed to what we had in the past. During the Great Depression, because a lot of people had lost pretty much everything that they had, some people had taken it upon themselves to commit suicide, and one such person came into City Hall and jumped over the side into the atrium and landed on the first floor next to a gentleman. And that gentleman was startled so bad by the falling body that he himself died of a heart attack right on the spot. And we did have chicken wire strewn across the entire openings on all floors for the atrium so that people wouldn't commit acts like that again in the future. And I believe up until the late 80s, when Mayor Norquist took over, he had ordered the removal of the chicken wire to make it look a little more pedestrian friendly. In terms of reading, because this whole area of Milwaukee was basically swampland, Tamarack Swamp. And when City Hall was built, there were wooden pilings put into the ground to help support this heavy building on this really mushy land. And the pilings are currently still in place. They're wood pilings, and they have to remain completely submerged in order for them to keep their rigidity. And even to this day, I have to take a reading on a water meter every week, and I record what the meter says, so this way we can calculate how many gallons of water are used. It pretty much acts like a toilet tank. When the water level drops to a certain point, then the pilings and all the groundwater gets filled up again to keep it submerged, because otherwise if the pilings get exposed to the air, then they would start to dry rot, and then the building would start sinking in certain places.
I found it really interesting to hear those stories about the bell ringer and his family. They must have lived an interesting life up there in that tower. The City Hall building is home to so much of Milwaukee's history, and the stories live on in the walls of the building itself. The city of Milwaukee is home to so much of our country's history, and each building has its own interesting story to tell. Next time you find yourself in any of Milwaukee's historical regions, take a minute to think about the history that made each building come to life. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Once again, I'm your host, Victor Jacobo. The next time you're driving through downtown Milwaukee, remember all of the history that's passing you by and how many stories this city has to tell. Thanks for watching Stories of the City.